Radha Madhava Kunja Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Yashodanandana Brajajana Yashodanandana Brajajana Janana Jamuna Tira Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Yashodanandana Brajajana Yashodanandana Brajajana Jamuna Tira Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. Jai Radha Madhava Madhava Jai Radha Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Oh, the Jai Vishnupad, Namahamsa, Pri Pradgacharya, Stotra Satta, Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Hiraboy, Charanaravind Bhakti Vedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, ISKCON DBP, Founder Charya's Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Namacharya, Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Samavata Bhakti Vrinda Ki, Harinam Sankirtan Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Jai Nitai Gaura Premanande, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru, to Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Savakaya Chaturandritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakandritam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kansana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Jaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Dharam Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayesa badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatu tamashloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotee. All that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, whose praise with transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahmasamitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Vishwasya Namaha. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, the Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Sarabhyaya Namaha. Om Sarabhyaya Namaha. Om Sarabhyaya Namaha. Mukam karoti vacharam pangum langayate girim yatkripa tamaham bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Yatkripa tamaham bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our morning Bhagavatam class. We continue from the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 15, entitled Instructions for Civilized Human Beings. And okay, today we're doing 40, correct? Yeah, 40. Yeah. Atmanam Ched Vijaniyat Param Jnana Dhutashaya Kim Icchan Kasya Va Hetor Deham Pushnati Lampataha Atmanam Ched Vijaniyat Param Jnana Dhutasya Kimichan Kasya Bahetor Deham Pushnati Lampatah Atmanam Ched Vijaniyat Param Jnana Dhutasya Kimichan Kasya Bahetor Deham Pushnati Lampatah Atmanam Ched Vijaniyat Param Jnana Dhutasya Kim Icchan Kasya Vahetor Deham pushnati lampatah.
Deham pushnati lampatah. Atmanam ched vijaniyat.
Atmanam chad vijaniyat. Param jnana dutasya. Kim nityam kasya bahetor.
Deham pushnati lampata.
Eham pushnati lampata. Atmanam chad vijaniyat. Param jnana dutasya. Kim nityam kasya bahetor.
Deham pushnati lampatah.
Deham pushnati lampatah.
Atmanam ched vijaniyat.
Atmanam chad vijaniyat. Param jnanadutasya. Kim nityam kasya bahetor. Deham pushnati lampatah. Atmanam. The soul and the super soul.
The soul and
Chet, it, vijaniyat, can understand. Param, who are transcendental, beyond this material world.
beyond this material world.
Jnana, by knowledge. Dhutta ashaya, one who has cleansed his consciousness. Kim, what? Icchan, desiring material comforts. Kasya, for whom? Va, or hetoho, for what reason? Deham, the material body. Pushnati, he maintains. Lampataha, being unlawfully addicted to sense gratification. The translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Sridham Prabhupada Ki Jai. The human form of body is meant for understanding the self and the supreme self, the supreme personality of Godhead, both of whom are transcendentally situated. If both of them can be understood when one is purified by advanced knowledge, for what reason and for whom does a foolish, greedy person maintain the body for sense gratification? Kindly repeat after me. The human form of body is meant for understanding the self and the super self, the self and the supreme self, the supreme personality of Godhead, both of whom are transcendentally situated. If both of them can be understood when one is purified by advanced knowledge, for what reason and for whom does a foolish, greedy person maintain the body for sense gratification? Very good question. Now we'll find out the answer. Purport. Of course, everyone in this material world is interested in maintaining the body for sense gratification. But but by cultivating knowledge, one should gradually understand that the body is not the self. Both the soul and the supersoul are transcendental to the material world. This is to be understood in the human form of life, especially when one takes sannyas. A sannyasi who has one who has understood the self should be engaged in elevating the self and associating with the super self. Our Krishna consciousness movement is meant for elevating the living being, for promotion back home, back to Godhead. Seeking such elevation is one's duty in the human form of life. Unless one performs this duty, why should one maintain the body? Especially if a sannyasi not only maintains the body by ordinary means, but does everything to maintain the body, including even eating meat and other abominable things. He must be a lampata, a greedy person, simply engaged in sense gratification. A sannyasi must specifically remove himself from the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, which disturb one as long as one is not fully aware that the body is separate from the soul. Translation again. The human form of body is meant for understanding the self and the supreme self, the supreme personality of Godhead, both of whom are transcendentally situated. If both of them can be understood when one is purified by advanced knowledge, for what reason and for whom does a foolish, greedy person maintain the body for sense gratification? So this is a main, we call recurring theme. We are constantly being reminded when we read, of course, both Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, that this human form of life, human body, has been especially awarded to us for a very specific purpose. That specific purpose being self-realization. And the verse, as well as the purport, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains clearly what self-realization means. Self-realization means understanding both the self and the supreme self. And Prabhupada goes on to explain the supreme self means the supreme personality of Godhead, not only Paramatma. Because yogis can realize sometimes the localized aspect of the Lord within the heart. These are described in the Bhagavatam, the three levels of self-realization. Vadanti tat tattvavidam tattvam yas jnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti sabjate. The beginning level of self-realization, aham brahmasmi, that I am different from the body. More elevated level of self-realization, to realize the presence of the super soul, within the heart, and more elevated, the perfectional level is to realize the source of that super soul means the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. So specifically here it mentions that this is only possible by cultivation of knowledge, isn't it? The whole Vedic culture is arranged in such a way so that one can have opportunity from the very beginning of life, from the early days, from childhood, to be educated and trained in ultimately in Krishna consciousness. And this is very much strongly ingrained. It is meant to be strongly, clearly and strongly established. It is actually in the Vedic culture, when the Vedic culture is in place, that this human form of life is a rare opportunity that is meant primarily for that purpose. So of course, because we have the body, there is the word kama is often translated as sense gratification. But there are two meanings of kama actually that we should understand, because as long as we have this material body and as long as we are in the material world, there is a minimum amount of, let's say, sense gratification. Maybe better not to call it sense gratification, but what we call meeting the needs of the body. Sarva kama. In the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada translates this particular section where he emphasizes how he translates kama in that context, sarva kama, that all material necessities come from the mahi, from the land. So in other words, kama can be translated as either sense gratification, uncontrolled sense gratification, which is the condition of those who are devoid of knowledge, who are simply on the gross bodily platform. Or kama can also be translated and understood as meeting the material necessities of life. Because we have this body, we cannot deny that every day the body needs to have some basic facilities. Every day the body has to be fed. Every day the body has to take some rest. So there are activities of the senses, but when one cultivates this knowledge, when one knows what the aim of life is, and this cannot be understood by modern day civilization. Vedic culture is promoting what is it? The reduction or to minimize is underlining the importance of minimizing sense gratification or regulating sense gratification. Modern day society is totally the opposite, isn't it? People are taught, and there's so much of advertising and propaganda for more and more activities of sense gratification. Buy this product, you'll be more happy. Get this latest gadget, etc., etc. But in Vedic culture, that's why sometimes people in the West, they criticize India or they criticize Vedic culture that this is backwards. You're not, you should be endeavoring for advancement, isn't it? Look at us. We have all these super highways. We have all of this technology. What do you have? You're a poor country like that. This is the general understanding, misunderstanding actually, because they base advancement simply on material advancement. But we are seeing now it has been a bit more than maybe 200 years that modern civilization has been on this path of so-called, economic development, material advancement, and anyone who observes and analyzes the results will see that it is totally devastating. It is we are as Prabhupada would say, we are killing. Modern day civilization is a killing civilization. We're killing ourselves. We're literally killing, of course, especially animals. We are destroying and exploiting the Mother Earth, the soil, so many things, due to actually because sense gratification or kama is blind, isn't it? There is that's explained also in the Bhagavad Gita. There's no satiation, just like if you pour ghee on the fire, then it will simply take more and more ghee. So sense gratification, there is no end to sense gratification. Hare Krishna. And therefore, we are advised also in the Shastra how the more one indulges in activities of sense gratification, the more he actually increases his suffering, which seems like paradoxical. It seems like totally contradictory. How can one who is engaging in activities of sense gratification, how the result can be suffering? The reality is such, because the more we abuse this body, then by the simple fact of abusing the body, of not properly utilizing it for its primary purpose, which is of self-realization, we are, which is the situation in modern day society, practically every moment, the vast majority of people are engaged in activities of adharma. Hare Krishna. Adharma. They smell very nice. Hare Krishna. Yeah. Adharma. So adharma means, there are many meanings of adharma, but one that is more easy for us to understanding. Adharma means unlawful. Breaking the law. What happens when we break the law?
What is the punishment?
Huh?
We shall get the punishment.
Yes, we will suffer.
Yeah.
Through the form of a ticket or imprisonment or whatever it may be. When we go against the established laws of the land, every country has laws. Of course, these are man-made laws, but still, they are laws. One cannot argue that this is a man-made law, I won't follow it. Many of the laws, because they are man-made and not according to Shastra, are actually not correct. But the general laws, like how fast one should go on a highway, there are speed limits. So if one breaks that law, then one will get a ticket, and of course he has to pay. And the end result of breaking the law is suffering, isn't it? What most people are unaware of is that there are universal laws which are totally beyond our control, and we may be aware of them or not aware of them. We may accept them or not accept them. They will act. Um, and these are laws that are enacted by, we say, nature. There's laws of nature, but behind nature there is something else also. Behind nature uh, there is direction. Nature in Sanskrit is known as prakriti, and prakriti is well, this connects with the verse today. There's two forms of prakriti. The general understanding of prakriti means material nature, that is called apara prakriti. And the other, very often less known meaning of prakriti is para prakriti, means the self. What we generally don't know, don't understand, is that both para prakriti and apara prakriti, their prakriti means they are actually dependent. They're not independent. They are subservient. Just like the self, the jiva, living entity, is, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore created. Mamai vangsho jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. We are the eternally created parts and parcel of Krishna. That means that we are dependent. Anything which is created is dependent on the creator, isn't it? Yeah. So here you missed a nice purport that Prabhupada, and the text also, which is especially directed to sannyasis. Of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about sannyas yoga. So sannyas is not only for sannyasis, because sannyas means actually ultimately detachment, isn't it? To become detached from sense gratification, to become detached from the material bodily concept of life. And therefore, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains how, although it's a general instruction for the whole of society, that all of us, whether we are brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, or sannyas, everyone is meant to strive for self-realization. But especially, that is the primary responsibility of sannyasis. We can also say that, in addition, it is the responsibility of brahmanas, isn't it? Looking at the varna side and the ashram side. So the brahmanas are especially those who are meant to be dedicated to cultivate the science of Brahman, or self-realization. And of course, within the Vedic culture, Prabhupada says, first is varna, then is ashrama. So there's a whole science. Generally, those who are brahmanas, Brahminical, they have access to the four ashramas. Brahmanas have access to the four ashramas. Kshatriyas have access to only 3 ashramas. Vaishyas have access to only 2 ashramas. And Shudras have access to only 1, which is Grihastha, householder life. Shudras don't receive the type of formal training or education that is there in Gurukul. They don't attend Gurukul. But the culture, Vedic culture, is such that through many other ways, especially through art and culture, and through the good association that is there when Vedic culture is in place, then every member of the society, because actually the vast majority of members don't go to Gurukula. Gurukula is actually, we don't think about it so much, but it's a very specialized system of education It's just like PhD courses are anyone can go for a PhD course, but generally very small percentage of people end up getting a PhD because it requires many years of study and requires a certain type of inclination or aptitude. So in a similar way, the traditional system of Gurukula, which is highly, when we look at it closely, actually highly sophisticated. And one of the primary and first instructions which is given and stressed throughout one's training as a brahmachari is controlling sense gratification, performing through the performance of tapasya. Tapasya brahmacharena samenacha damenacha. Although it is a common general instruction for the whole of society, controlling the senses, controlling the mind, it is especially taught in the early beginning within the system of Gurukula. So the text here basically is telling that this human form of life is meant for realizing both the self and the supreme self, the supreme personality of Godhead. So if one is actually doing that, then there is no reason for one to engage in activities of sense gratification, which actually is only possible if one is cultivating this transcendental knowledge. That is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita how we cannot simultaneously hope to become advanced spiritually by simultaneously remaining engaged in activities of sense gratification. It's like, yeah, there is bhoga and tyaga. So real bhoga means activities of sense gratification, and tyaga means renunciation. But we know from, again, Bhagavatam, that this renunciation, tyaga, and also this cultivation of knowledge more easily, more quickly can be attained or achieved by those who practice bhakti or devotional service. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Asu Vairagyam Jnanam Sayad Ahaitukam. So this important verse in the first canto underlines how by the proper practice of bhakti, devotional service, Vasudevi Bhagavati. Bhakti means to Vasudev, to Krishna. Then ahaituki, in an effortless, natural, automatic way, causeless way, these two effects will take place, becoming detached from activities of sense gratification and gradually increasing our understanding of the spiritual subject matters. So this is, it's interesting how Prabhupada also, I think he's aiming at some particular group of sannyasis. We will not mention any names, but because that's why Prabhupada was always very, very strong in preaching against two types of transcendentalists: those who are impersonal, the impersonalists, Mayavadis, because they are they don't have access to bhakti, because bhakti means interaction between two, isn't it? Yeah. And Mayapur philosophy does not accommodate this concept because we're all one. So there's no interaction there. And the other type of transcendentalists are those who are in the name of spirituality, in the name of under the guise of sannyas life also, engage in such activities as meat eating and sometimes gambling or intoxication. And so this is totally not in line, to say the least, with Shastra. We'll just read the verse again here, and maybe one or two lines from the purport that speak especially about sannyasis. Translation to text 40. The human form of body is meant for understanding the self and the supreme self, the supreme personality of Godhead, both of whom are transcendentally situated. Yes. If both of them can be understood when one is purified by advanced knowledge. So both can only be understood by purified advanced knowledge. For what reason and for whom does a foolish, greedy person maintain the body for sense gratification? So the body should be maintained in one lecture that's in the series Nectar Devotion, very nicely, Prabhupada, to make this point also, he explains as follows, that we we should not live to eat, or we should eat to live. Most people, they live to eat. Whole life is centered on, it's a form of sense gratification. They live for how to increase, how to accumulate more and more, isn't it? Yeah. So we should not live to eat, but we should eat to live. We should eat the minimum. In other places, Prabhupada would spell it out. Vedic culture, and this is actually, I'm sure you came across this one verse in the, I think in the previous chapter, where Prabhupada says that even householders should not endeavor for economic development. This is very shocking for us. Did I read right? Even householders, should not be endeavoring for economic development. What does that mean? We should all live householder life? No, it means that one should not be overly endeavoring. One should meet the duties and responsibilities. Of course, if one is a personality like Tukaram, then his wife was looking at him always, what kind of a husband I got, yeah. We're not telling everyone to be exactly like Tukaram, but he had the right mood and mentality. He was less preoccupied. Because one who is cultivating Krishna consciousness knows that, you see, everything is already ordained. Due to my previous karma, previous activities, it's already determined how much bank balance I will have in this lifetime. So the more we have this kind of understanding, doesn't mean that we become irresponsible now and we just say, well, my bank balance will automatically be taken care of. One has to take up responsibility, but one should not become entangled and become overly anxious for even the material necessities of life. Yeah. So that kind of mood or mentality is only possible by, as the text is mentioning here, by proper development of transcendental knowledge. And I'll just read this one or two quick sentences regarding sannyasis. Yeah. That especially if a sannyasi not only maintains the body by ordinary means, but does everything to maintain the body, including even eating meat and other abominable things, he must be a lampata, a greedy person, simply engaged in sense gratification. A sannyasi must specifically remove himself from the urges, and of course, Prabhupada brings us back to the first instruction of the nectar of instruction. Vacho begam, manasa krodha begam, jiva begam, buddharopasta begam. Should free himself from the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, which disturb one as long as one is not fully aware that the body is separate from the soul. So, any comments or questions? Krishna Chaitanya, question? They have to get in the habit, you know. I think he knows Telugu, no? Yeah, too tough of a question. Oh.
Brahmavadis.
Brahmavadi.
So they will question us like how we can practice the Krishna consciousness.
The Brahmavadis will ask us,
yeah,
if only they would. Brahmavadis, those who realize the Brahman feature of the Absolute Truth, they are actually good candidates to understand. They will only be able to understand if they read with an open mind the Bhagavatam, and if they associate with elevated Vaishnavas. By reading because the Bhagavatam is especially focused and emphasizing that there's something beyond Brahman realization. We quoted that verse. And the Prabhupada explains, our Vaishnava acharyas explain, unless one is blessed by a pure devotee of the Lord, unless one associates with Vaishnavas, one cannot become a Vaishnava. Isn't it? And of course, to associate, there is a quality of association needed. There are prerequisites as outlined in the Bhagavad Gita. Very famous instruction tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. So to actually have darshan, tattvadarshi. Tattvadarshi means actual understanding, darshan, of the absolute truth in its different features, beyond impersonal understanding, beyond Brahman realization. Yeah. Yeah. Any other?
Yes, Maharaj. Regarding this puppet, the grocers, they should have some economical, they should not endeavor for the economical,
They should not?
endeavor for the economical,
Yes, correct.
as a grocer, we have some needs. There should be a borderline. We should not be like a Tukaram, we should not be like Ambani. What is the borderline we have to maintain as a grocer?
It will vary from one grihastha to another.
So,
It's like, what's the minimum wage? Doesn't work like that. There's no minimum wage. Those very important purports, that's in the previous chapter, the chapter entitled Ideal Family Life. Ideal Family Life, very important instructions given by Narada Muni and very enlightening purports given also by Srila Prabhupada. So the idea is that, because we are all individuals and we have, especially in householder life, there are more than one individual, there's more than one individual. There are a number of individuals, and so therefore it's like you have more variables, more factors to take into consideration. So there is, we see in some of the examples, some of the associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like it mentions when the devotees went to Jagannath Puri. Shivananda Sen, he used to be, because he was fairly well off materially speaking, so he would pay for the travel. He would pay the toll. It's described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It means that some of the followers, like Kolavesa Sridham, was very poor. Yeah. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't tell that he has to have a certain amount every month to maintain himself. He was those in the Vedic culture. Prabhupada often mentions this point. Even people who are poor in the Vedic culture, and this is very different understanding, very different mentality than modern day, let's say, democratic culture or economic system. In the Vedic culture, by nature means it's the understanding which is easily accepted by those who are brought up in that culture, that one will not be overly disturbed if one is much poorer, materially speaking, let's say, than someone else. So many factors are there. Maybe due to health, due to not having had the opportunity to get higher education or whatever, or just one's nature will be such that economically one will not be so. You see, this brings in the whole concept of Varnasrama, whereby the vast majority of people, and that's why there's such a big high level of anxiety in majority of people, everyone is being propelled, everyone is being pushed to perform more and more and to increase their, status of living and their income, etc., like that. But the idea is that in the Vedic culture, not everyone is the same. I mean, this is a recognized uh, reality, and many people are meant to be, by nature, dependent on others, dependent even physically on others. So um, these things cannot be properly understood unless we are exposed to what are the basic features of the Vedic culture, beginning with this point which is being made in the verse today, that it's only by the cultivation of transcendental knowledge that we can learn to accept that there will be differences, that some people will be more opulent than I am, will be more healthy than I am, and I should learn to accept that as a fact of life. Of course, that does not mean one should not be endeavoring, but the modern day context in which we are living is pushing individuals uh, towards, I mean, in believing in things which are not according to reality. In other words, not everyone is the same, and not everyone is meant to be as we are promoting in modern day society, like totally independent. So it means one should endeavor to the best of his ability and not be overly preoccupied. And of course, when there is proper leadership in society, those who may be less capable materially, for example, to make ends meet, so to speak, they will be assisted or helped in different ways. That is one of the, there are three main activities of kshatriyas, of leaders in society, beginning with giving protection, physical protection and other forms of protection to all the citizens, including not only human beings, but animals, etc. So protection, administration, and welfare. So it is the duty and responsibility of leaders to give material assistance when there is a need for that. So I'm sure that many of the aspects that are being presented, like in the Bhagavatam, because it's focused on Vedic culture, it's focused on very much Varnasrama culture as well. But because we are so far removed from that, we cannot immediately relate to what that means, because we're caught up in the modern way of living, which is actually going against, if we just look at the whole, since you're talking about economy, the science of economy, which is a major aspect of the Vedic culture. Vedic culture has very clear understanding of what is meant to be the ideal economic system within society. And modern day society can in no way can they relate to that, generally speaking, cannot relate to that. And therefore, unless one studies and discusses this philosophy, and part of that philosophy, that's one of the four sciences that is part of the Vedic culture, the science of economics, then we will not be. In other words, the whole Vedic culture is like it's a package. Not only just one thing. They're all interrelated, very closely interrelated, and now that system is broken. And for us as devotees, it's very, very difficult, extremely difficult to conceive and to make it to put it back together, so to speak. And it actually is not possible as long as we remain within the existing present parameters, which are very, very opposite, very different, and often having a completely different goal and objective. Yeah. Any other? Okay, we can close here. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki.